Hello, Congregation Beth Sholom, and welcome to this week's edition of Take Home Torah. This week we'll be studying Parshat Terumah, and in addition, this Shabbat is also Shabbat Zachor. My name is Michael Rappaport, and these are my boys, Manu Rappaport and Julian Rappaport.
And Kagan Rappaport.
And we also have the noted Torah scholar, Kagan Rappaport. Parshat Terumah and Shabbat Zachor are very meaningful for the Rappaport family. That's because 3 years ago at Beth Sholom, we celebrated Julian's Bar Mitzvah, which was Parshat Terumah, and last year we celebrated Manu's Bar Mitzvah on Shabbat Zachor. That happened to be the last time we were able to have Saturday morning services at Beth Sholom before COVID hit. So first, let's start, Julian, and talk about what happens in Parshat Terumah.
Well, in Parshat Terumah, it starts with God telling the Israelites to bring things, lots of things, namely gold, precious metals, silver, bronze, lots of rare woods, silk, even dolphin skin, mainly things that they took from the Egyptians when they escaped out of Egypt. And then once God tells them to bring all of these things, he basically says, well, here's what you're going to build. And he gives out very detailed instructions for a tabernacle. And it's incredibly detailed. It's 3 cubits here, 2 cubits here, insert rod A into slot B. It is essentially an IKEA manual for putting together furniture, except you're putting together a sacred prayer house.
So, Julian, at your Bar Mitzvah, you actually equated the story of Parshat Terumah to the Israelites actually having their own Bar Mitzvah. Can you talk about that?
Well, what is a Bar Mitzvah? It's essentially one person joining the community in their own way. And in Parshat Terumah, every Israelite was asked, but not commanded, to bring gifts and materials. It was basically a bring what you have and keep what you need kind of thing. And it sort of resembled a Marxist kind of to each according to their ability, from each according to their need kind of thing. I mean, is the Torah advocating for communism? Maybe. But that's not the point. The point is that every Israelite was able to join the community in their own way based on what they were able to bring, how they were able to help in building the Mishkan, and the kinds of materials they had, and just they got to choose how they joined and what level.
That's great. So, Manu, why don't you talk a little bit about what Shabbat Zachor is all about?
So Shabbat Zachor is the week before Purim, the Shabbat before Purim, and it translates to Shabbat of memory. And during Shabbat Zachor, the Haftarah and Maftir are replaced from the normal Parashat, Haftarah and Maftir, to the special Shabbat Zachor, Haftarah and Maftir. And the reason it is the week before Purim is because Haman is a descendant of the Amalekites, and we'll tell you why we're stomping in a second, and the story is about the Amalekites.
Well,
So in the Haftarah and Maftir, King Saul and Samuel, the prophet, go and kill Agag, the king of the Amalekites. Now, the Amalekites have had a rough history. Oh, sorry, the Amalekites.
Yeah, no,
there.
get in there.
Sorry. The Amalekites have had a rough history with the Jews because they ambushed the Jews in the desert when they had been escaping Egypt and they were wandering in the desert. And so God asks for King Saul and the prophet Samuel to take revenge. And what I thought was so interesting about this story is partly why we stomp whenever we say Amalek, which is the 3 commandments out of the 613 commandments about the Amalekites. Now the first one... there,
It's all
okay.
the knees.
Yeah, the knees. Now the first one, the first commandment is, remember what Amalek did to the Jewish people. And that's why we're telling the story of Amalek during Shabbat Zachor. The second one is wipe out the memory of Amalek. And that's why we stomp, to wipe out, blot out the name of Amalek, just like how we say boo for Haman.
Boo!
And the third is not to forget Amalek's atrocities and ambush on our journey from Egypt in the desert. And again, that's why we're telling this story on Shabbat Zachor. And I was a little bit confused when I heard these commandments, because two of them are telling to remember the story of Amalek. And then the other one is saying to blot out, to wipe out his name. Amalek's name. There we go. And I thought that was an interesting parallel, because it says to remember, but also to blot out, to forget. So what I took away from this is that even though this is a bit of a sad story that the Amalekites ambushed us in the desert, it's a sad story. We still need to remember it. So we blot out Amalek's name, but also remember it.
That's great. And Manu, you also talked at your Bar Mitzvah about some memories of our family that also had similar kinds of connotations of both remembering both good times and bad times. Do you want to tell that story?
Yeah, so I told the story of two very important objects. A pair of candlesticks. So I guess it's one because it's a pair. But anyways, these candlesticks, I brought them here to show you. They have a very important history in our family, and they've been through a lot. So they were my Aunt Gizzy's on my great Aunt Gizzy's on my dad's side when they lived in Eastern Europe. And before the Holocaust, when the Nazis were coming to Hungary where they lived, Aunt Gizzy buried these candlesticks underground so the Nazis wouldn't find them. And after she survived Auschwitz and after the Nazis had left, she came back to these candlesticks and took them back, and they were still there, and now we have them here. And I think that's such an interesting story about how much they've been through.
That's great. Julian, can you talk about how we can tie together Parshat Terumah and Shabbat Zachor?
Well, in Parshat Terumah, we're building a prayer house, a place to prayer, and it's essentially just a synagogue, but the only difference is it's portable and right for desert wandering. But the point of a synagogue is, I mean, think about all the things we do in a synagogue. We remember what God has created and given to us. We praise God for doing all of those things and giving us all those things. We remember people who have died, remember people who are sick. But that's the word, it's remembering. We're remembering certain things about us and about God that are important to us. And one of those things is on Shabbat Zachor about what a God did to us. I could see your leg was getting ready. You thought I was going to say it. I was not going to say it.
Agag, king of the Amalekites.
There we go.
There.
But it's a parallel because we're both creating, in Terumah, we're creating something to remember in, and in Shabbat Zachor, we're creating something to remember inside of.
That's great. So there was one other thing that I was struck by when I first read the Haftorah when Manu was starting to practice it. And the Haftorah, if you want to take a look, it's Samuel, book 1. It is chapter 15, and it's verse, I'm at the end here, 32 through 34. These are the last three verses of the Haftorah. And what's amazing about it is it brings to this crescendo the killing of Agag, king of the Amalekites. And then it ends in a very reduced way. So let me tell you a little bit about it. Here's what it says. Samuel said, "Bring forward to me King Agag of Amalek." Agag approached him with faltering steps, and Agag said, "Ah, bitter death is at hand." Samuel said, "As your sword has bereaved women, so shall your mother be bereaved among women." And Samuel cut Agag down before the Lord at Gilgal. Samuel then departed for Ramah, and Saul went up to his home at Gibeah of Saul. So it comes to this end, a bitter end, where the Israelites or the Jewish people finally take revenge against the Amalekites. And then at the end, Saul and Samuel just went home. And that's how it ends. So Manu, what did you think about that when you first read that?
So when you told me about that at first, I thought about this quote, which I really like, by Yitzhak Rabin, who is a prime minister of Israel. And this quote was, "We do not celebrate the death of our enemies." And I really like that quote because it says, even though we think we're doing the right thing by killing them, we shouldn't celebrate it because we are still killing someone. Just like that, we don't glorify killing Agag, king of the Amalekites. And we do that by ending it with a kind of boring, almost, verse where we go home. And I think that's a really interesting idea by Yitzhak Rabin and in the Haftarah.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight for Take Home Torah. And we hope that you have a wonderful Shabbat, and we look forward to seeing you again at Congregation Beth Sholom soon.
We did it. Nice.